Hello and welcome back or welcome to the channel. I'm Loudguns, and in today's video we're going to be taking a dive into the future of Star Citizen's industrial and economic gameplay. I'm something of a generalist when it comes to SC, and I enjoy a bit of the old pew pew. It was always the plans for deep meaningful industry in the game that really captivated me. And the combat aspects to my mind depend on this to some degree. We need a reason to fight and complete beyond pretty explosions. Having completed all of my major guides for industrial gameplay loops in the here and now, I wanted to take this time to make a video about what the future holds. So if this sounds good to you, grab a cup of tea while I roll the intro, then let's get into it. Just a quick note to apologise for the impromptu couple of weeks off without a vid. I lost my voice due to an ongoing cold and tried to record the script for this video a couple of times, but it just wasn't really up to scratch. Well, maybe scratchiness in general was actually the problem. But this is a video I've been having going around in my head for quite some time, so I didn't want to settle for a subpar presentation. A big thanks up front to my Patreon supporters who really helped me avoid the pressure of just getting videos out to keep the YouTube algo overlord happy. I maybe don't shout enough about these folks because I don't like to come across as begging, but their support is massively appreciated as it does help keep the lights on when I can't put a video out per week as usual. The term industry can mean a lot of different things to different people, so I think a good place to start is by defining what I'm going to be talking about in this video. I think a good way to contextualise a lot of it is by using the Star Citizen 1.0 slides from Rich Tyra's presentation at last year's SitCon. Here he laid out the 6 major guilds that will act as umbrellas for the game's mission givers. The Academy of Science, Interstellar Transport Guild, United Resource Workers, Imperial Sports Federation, Mercenary Guild and the Council. And the core of industrial gameplay is undoubtedly housed under the United Resource Workers, who are labelled as the Industrial Guild. For the purposes of this video, that's really where we're going to focus. I think the lines in some areas certainly blur, and we'll see a lot of crossover with the cargo-focused Interstellar Transport Guild and the science and exploration-focused Academy of Science. Speaking of which, I think one of the core themes to start with is really increasing synergies between the various game loops. Currently, mining, salvage and cargo work independently and have a fairly simple run-through. Crack rocks or ships, extract the resources, refine if necessary, turn into space cash. They don't really feed into one another. But with the introduction and fleshing out of more of the loops, I would hope to see far more interaction between the different professions. Refining is one of the key missing pieces of the puzzle here, and with the inclusion of player-operated ship-based refineries like the Misk Expanse and RSI Galaxy, there's the potential to add another layer to industrial ops. This also facilitates being able to work in more remote locations. Right now, when we consider locations for mining ops, we've got to factor in distance to refinery-capable stations, whereas incorporating our own refinery will let us get further out and stay out there for longer. This also feeds into the larger mining ships, the likes of the Arastra and the Orion. While primarily listed as miners, these contain onboard refineries, allowing you to engage in the full circular loop of turning rocks into finished product. Refining is likely to also expand out beyond supplementing the mining profession. The incorporation of fuel gathering and refining, as well as more development of salvaging mechanics that should hopefully lead to us seeing more resource types than the 2 we currently have in game. Similarly, I think there's a lot of potential for the more developed salvaging mechanics, incorporating component salvaging as well as hull scraping and structural salvage, to feed the less developed refueling and repair industries. A while ago, during my Getting Organised series, which I am laying the groundwork for a return to, I started to put together a fleet for a salvage-focused org, but at that point realised that it was perfect instead to offer a one-stop shop salvage and repair org instead. The materials and components acquired through salvaging, along with the fuel from fuel gatherers like the Starfarer, can filter perfectly into the repair and refueling game loops. And you know, if your clients can't pay for your services, you can always just show up in a reclaimer. This is also where I always struggle to separate cargo hauling out of the industry definition. because everything you extract, refine or want to resupply is going to need hauling from A to B to C. So anything that pushes the resource gathering aspects further also pushes the cargo hauling. But probably the most important aspect of the 1.0 industry roadmap is crafting, as ultimately I think moving the focus away from credits towards crafting, and by extension, no pun intended, base building, is one of the key endgame goals for the first live version of the game. Right now, the focus of industrial gameplay is for the most part to get credits, which you can then spend on things like ships and components. But having crafting as the end destination for the majority of your raw resources adds a much higher level of meaning and purpose for industrialists. And with more of the focus on crafting, we also open up the possibility of specialisation within resource gathering professions. With larger ships on the horizon, these fill the logical role of mass bulk gatherers, but where I think smaller ships like the Prospector can and will still carve out a niche is in focusing on high quality materials. With a small SCU capacity, you already need to be picky about what you bring back in terms of value, but as we see the material quality aspect enter the game, it might make sense for pilots to use smaller ships to quickly scout locations for specifically high quality mats. I always think it's a good thing when smaller ships can have a dual place in the meta, where at the start it's your early cheap option, but in the later game it represents a specialist tool. So even when you've got your Orion up and running, you could still come back to your Prospector occasionally just to seek out some top tier AAA mats. If you're interested in learning more about the plans for crafting and base building, I'll pop a link to my deep dive videos on these subjects in the video description down below. Something which I would really like to see though is an expansion of the guild mission system that we've seen for the combat side, to add to the industrial side. I hope that what's been laid out in the Merc Guild, Headhunters and Ghillie missions is really just a framework for expanding out to all 6 guilds. These missions do a really good job of introducing players to the various combat systems, and then creating repeatable gameplay. A current criticism I would have of SC's industry gameplay is that there's not really a natural way into the loops. It works out alright for people like me, but without YouTube guides there's no way the game itself is really guiding you into these areas. The time-limited events like Supply or Die and Resource Drive have given us cool missions driving you towards certain less sought-after commodities. I reckon we should have some longer-term version of this requiring certain mined or salvaged materials. And this is also a good opportunity to introduce more guild script currencies. One of the most common complaints I've heard from folks is that combat tends to be the main way to acquire anything good like top-tier components. So securing a different route to that would be positive for the game. Personally though, I think it's always good to create crossover opportunities, creating areas of specialty so that players who like different aspects of the game are encouraged to work together and trade with one another. And speaking of this, probably one of the biggest improvements we could see in the game is the introduction of proper ways to trade between players. Right now, websites like the UEX Marketplace and various Discord servers fill the gap for P2P trades, and at the last sitcom we saw some great looking plans for player-run shops in-game that allow players to safely exchange goods. But honestly, I think that this is something that the devs should really consider at least a stopgap solution for. With the introduction of Wicklow, there's already incentive for players to trade, but sending people out of the game to third-party websites and then adding the risk that one party screws the other over due to the lack of a proper escrow system is just a bit lacking. Even a rudimentary player marketplace that allowed players to list goods for collection at any of the major landing zones, and for other players to bid on them and collect, would just be a huge quality of life boon. And finally for this vid, I would include Resource Wars, mostly because I couldn't think of anything better to term it. We already have some sandbox missions where players compete over limited resources, and the Hathor missions are a great example of combining combat and industrial elements. We also had missions in the past like Wake of Disaster that specifically provided a large prize designed to be contested. I know that for some players these types of objectives make them feel a bit left out, but I think they're really important in cementing the coexistence of industrially minded and combat minded players. And much like I think it's really important to have plenty of content tailored to solo players and small parties, I also think it's crucial that we have some content aimed specifically at bigger groups and orgs. At the weekend, our org Frontier took on Nova in an org v org fight over one of the OLP stations around Daymar, and massive battles spanning capital ships, fighters and FPS are one of Star Citizen's most unique standout features. I just think we need more objectives that generate this type of content organically for players. And introducing high value industrial incentives to the mix is the perfect way to do it. It also gets a new type of player involved in this sort of content, the ones who like the mining, the salvaging, whatever the objective is. So if like me you're a bit of an industry nut, then let me know what else you think CIG should introduce to build this side of the game out. And what are you looking forward to the most? Is it your dream to sit on the bridge of an Orion smashing your way through an asteroid field? Or are you going to be carefully picking apart ship carcasses in your Vulture? If you enjoyed the vid and think I've earned it, then I would always massively appreciate if you liked, hit subscribe and shared it with your friends. With all that said, thanks for watching to the end, and I look forward to seeing you next time.